and welcome to day 2 of the Supporting Women in Science Conference. I am Dr. Afreen Sadia from Department of Community Health Sciences and also a fellow from Cohort 4. We begin today with session A, titled Building Blocks, Child Health and Development. This session will be chaired by Dr. Sidra Kaleem and Dr. Zara Hudboy. Let me introduce our co-chairs. Dr. Sidra Kaleem is a developmental pediatrician and pediatric neurologist, serving as an associate professor at the Aga Khan University Hospital. Her clinical and academic work centers on early childhood development with a strong research interest in understanding how environmental, social, and biological factors shape neurodevelopmental outcomes. She is actively engaged in multidisciplinary child health initiatives at Aga Khan University Hospital and contributes to improving early detection and management of developmental delays in low-resource settings. Her work integrates research, clinical care, and advocacy to advance child development services in Pakistan. Our second chair, Dr. Zara Hudboy. She is an associate professor in the Department of Pediatric and Child Health at the Aga Khan University. A physician by training, she holds a master's in health education from University of Cincinnati and a PhD in population and public health from Aga Khan University. With nearly a decade of public health research experience, she has led initiatives, hospital and community-based projects using digital health, point-of-care interventions, and AI-driven risk stratification for maternal and child health. Her funded research portfolio includes grants from Bill and Melinda Gates, Islamic Development Bank, and University of North Carolina. She was recently recognized globally as a goalkeeper champion for her exceptional work on maternal nutrition. It is my pleasure to invite Dr. Sidra Kaleem and Dr. Zara Hudboy to the stage to lead this session. Please join me in welcoming our co-chairs. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. And it should be a warm welcome because it is a slightly chilly morning in Karachi. It's a bit unexpected weather for early November, but welcome to everyone to this very important seminar, which we kick off today with our keynote address by Dr. Salima Villani. Dr. Villani is the Dean of School of Nursing and Midwifery at the Aga Khan University in Karachi, Pakistan, and a global health leader with extensive experience in maternal and newborn health. She previously served as global policy and advocacy advisor at Miracle Feet and vice president of global programs at March of Dimes. An AQ alumnus, she holds advanced degrees from Simons University, Harvard, and New York. She is recognized internationally for her work on birth defects prevention and co-founded World Birth Defects Day. Dr. Villani has served on numerous technical advisory groups with WHO and other global organizations. And today, she will be talking to us about Nursing Without Borders, a full circle journey in nursing leadership. Dr. Villani, over to you.
How's everyone? Good? Good energy? Okay. This is a light presentation. We can also have a little bit of a conversation and get to know each other a little bit. So I'm going to try and keep this morning light because I know that my colleagues will be presenting really serious scientific stuff. So Salima Villani is my name. I am the Dean of Aga Khan University School of Nursing and Midwifery here in Pakistan. I joined last year. I am a graduate of class of 1987 from the School of Nursing. I taught initially, and then I left for the US, and I have a decades-long career jumping around, doing this, that, and the other, and then life brought me back here last year. So, how did I get into nursing? You know, a lot of people think of nursing profession as, oh, it's humanist and, you know, people want to serve the world. I want to break that myth a little bit for you and say that people like me also get into nursing because of various opportunities. So how did I get into nursing? I am the sixth daughter of my parents. I grew up in Karachi. Um, I didn't have a desk. I didn't have a room of my own. I shared beds. Whoever fell asleep first got a bed in our apartment. So I was always one of those kids who just needed her space, needed time to think, and there was no space. There was no money either. So I heard about this School of Nursing. This has just opened. I was also quite a lost young girl who just got into trouble all the time. So I said, I came here and saw this beautiful red building. You know that the School of Nursing at AKU was the first entity that was built, first structure that was built, and the first operating academic entity at AKU. It's where AKU began, right? The first class graduated from the School of Nursing, it was called. So I came and I saw there was a room for every student. There was a bed, there was a desk, there was a window, and there were these beautiful courtyards. And I had nothing going on in my life, so I said, why not? I'll just come here and study here. Years later, I came across Virginia Woolf's book. A friend gave it to me, A Room of One's Own. And this is an essay she wrote when she was asked, this is like, we're talking about 1930s, but I don't think many of the people, women in Pakistan, have a different life than what she's describing in that. And she wrote that for a woman to be a writer, she was asked to speak at a conference about what do women need to be successful writers. And we can think about this as writing fiction, or we can think about this as science, or we can think about leadership, whatever. But she really profoundly at that point said a woman must have money and a room of her own if she is to write fiction, or she's to write. I needed that, and I didn't even know that in 1930s this woman got me. The other thing about science, leadership, women's rights, freedom, is again another very profound statement in her book. And this describes me so significantly, because growing up, I said I was getting into trouble because I was asking a lot of questions. And in our society, a young girl does not ask a lot of questions. She is not supposed to wear boy-cut hair and ride a bicycle in Karimabad colony, you know, with her buddy and getting into all kinds of things. So she said in that about women, she said, lock up your libraries if you like, but there is no gate, no lock, no bolt that can set upon the freedom of my mind. And this is what I was, just saying to everyone, don't give me your dogmas. Don't think that I'm the sixth daughter of my father, and because I'm so independent, I'm a boy. People would say, oh, ye to aapke bete jaisa hai. Ye to aapke bete jaisi hai. Aise baat karti hai, aise job karti hai. No, I am a daughter, and I have a freedom that I am pursuing. That is what I was, and Virginia Woolf, I don't know how she knew me, but she knew me before I was even born. Let's switch. So this is where I started. I'm going to talk a little bit about my career journey. So here in Pakistan, all over the world, all of us are talking about career ladder. How many of you, raise your hand, think that a career journey is a ladder? Raise your hands. All those in favor of this statement that career is a ladder. Okay, not many people think career is a ladder. So what do you think it is? What is a career journey if it is not a ladder? What is it? It's a roller coaster. Okay, what else can it be? Our very smart chairs, any thoughts? It's a snake and ladder game. You go up, you go down, you get eaten by a snake. A lot of women get eaten by snakes in the workplace, yes. Snake. Yeah. Beautiful. Yes, it is a path. Yes, it can be sidetracks. There are different ways. One, which I talked about recently out of my own mind, and I figured out that other people talk about it too. You know the climbing walls where you grab a little rock and you know, they're designed like that. You step here, you have a harness so that you don't fall. We can maybe think about career like that too, but I think that Sheryl Sandberg said it well. Careers are a jungle gym, not a ladder. How many of you were in the room yesterday when Provost Babella talked about her career? Yeah, from starting in Australia, basic sciences degree, to becoming a lawyer, to becoming a PhD in population, and this, that, and the other, going here and there. This is the kind of story mine is too. So the title, Nursing Without Borders, and a full circle. In my career, from when I left, graduated around, so first job I had was at AKU. I was hired as a junior instructor because we had such a shortage of nursing faculty. And although all the time I got here in the nursing program, then I was trying to get out of it, but somehow it just kept grabbing me. And then they did something wonderful. They said, okay, why don't you just become a faculty with us? So I became a junior trainee instructor. And that was my first job at AKU. I have had on my paychecks maybe 16, 17 employers while I was in the US. Jumping. Sometimes I went for an interview and people said, but you just got another job a year ago. Why are you here? And I would say, well, you know, I'm looking for better opportunities. So what? So I did do a lot of interesting stuff, some boring, some interesting. You see a van. I was actually, this particular van, it's outside design, its name, its construction. It's a nurse practitioner run mobile health clinic that provided health care to children of immigrant children, actually, in Brooklyn, New York. And I designed it. It was funded by the US government. It was an NYU College of Nursing van. I was its director. Even the name Feeling Good in Your Neighborhood was what we came up with as a team. Its interior, I took several trips to where it was being built. And the most interesting part was that I actually had to become a registered lobbyist in the state of New York to do fundraising for this van. It was a very big challenge. By the time I left this job, if I saw that van on one side of New York street, I would cross the street. It gave me so much nightmare, but it taught me so many things. It taught me how you look at a project, a work, a cause comprehensively. My most boring, uninteresting job was at that beautiful building called The Osborne. I was their director of quality initiatives. What the hell is quality initiatives? It's everything, anything. Just dump it on Salima Walani. She's the Director of Quality Initiatives. I had a beautiful office. This structure was amazing. It's in Rye, New York, one of the richest communities in the world, probably. And what did it do? It served the richest people. it actually was a retirement community with a nursing home, an assisted living facility, a home care service. And I was stuck there for about 4.5 years. At that time, it was my longest ever job. Why? Because I had a small child already. And then I was so bored in this job that I said, this is a good time to have a second child. So I then had a second child and stayed in this job. This also was an organization where I actually coined a term, idea closets. I thought that when you come to the Osborne, the HR, the leadership was so narrow-minded that it was a metaphor for me, that they told employees as if metaphorically, put your ideas in a closet and just come here and do what we want you to do. And then when you're leaving, collect your stale ideas and go somewhere. So there are jobs like that. In the end, towards later in my career, I worked at March of Dimes, and that was the formative thing that led me to do some really fantastic things. So life, career is a jungle gym. And then I don't know if this is a full circle or a U-turn. Again, it's my conflicted mind. So I just put in both symbols. So finally, I then came back last year. So where and how did I find my focus? How are we doing on time? We have about 2 more minutes. Oh, 2 more minutes. Ooh, we ran fast. Okay, so I joined March of Dimes. March of Dimes is an organization. You know, you see all these walks and campaigns that people do, the breast cancer walk, all kinds of walks. This is the organization that mastered that idea of campaigning for a cause. And I learned a lot there. I accidentally then, soon after joining it, I ended up at a meeting in Helsinki, and we talk about opportunities, you know, when you see it. So in this meeting, people were talking about, there was this guy, Pier Paolo Mastroiacovo. He was a pediatrician, Italian. He was talking about, we should have a World Birth Defects Day. And I was sitting in that room. I ended up there because my boss didn't want to go to that conference. He had some better, bigger thing to do, so I was there. And in that meeting, Pier Paolo and I talked about launching what we called the World Birth Defects Day movement. This was a solid movement, a solid concept, much needed. We knew why we needed it. We created it. These were the days, 2014. Hashtags were coming about. Twitter was alive. We started a movement. We called 12 organizations to join us as our charter organizations. We launched the first World Birth Defects Day in Tanzania. CDC, you can see that on the right side is the CDC. US CDC put the banner for the first time. Announcements came out. World Birth Defects Day is launched. And it was magical. It's unbelievable that sitting in a room, you could influence such a thing. We decided March 3rd, every year is World Birth Defects Day. Today, it's observed by hundreds of organizations all over the world. So we celebrated or observed the World Birth Defects Day in 2015. I said 12 organizations. Look at this chart. 2016, we had proliferated the movement. It was a social media movement. It just went on and on. There were days when you could do thunderclap, you could do live Twitter chats. I was very involved. I was actually at WHO doing this webinar in 2019 from WHO headquarters. I was writing blogs. I was publishing. And if you heard that I am, luckily with colleagues of this caliber, one of the 2% most cited scientists, if you can call me a scientist, in the world right now with Stanford University thing. Where did that come from? It actually came from all of this work that I was doing to promote the prevention, surveillance, and care of babies born with birth defects. Most of my consensus papers and all that were around that. It's a global movement, so it needs to be done from all sides. So when you believe in some cause, it needs to be everything, media, advocacy. We did conferences. So here's a very interesting one. I was not at AKU, I was not with AKU, but in 2015, I needed to organize, had to organize the 7th Birth Defects Conference. And I didn't have a partner. We needed a partner. We always needed to do it in a low middle income country. So I reached out to our colleagues at AKHS, and guess who was the CEO of AKHS East Africa? Suleiman. So Suleiman said, okay, and Zenith said, okay, we will host this conference for you. I raised $200,000, brought all that money to Tanzania. This was done with, as you can see, it's AKU, AKHS logos, followed by March of Dimes and CDC. This conference hosted about 33 people from 33 countries, and really Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, WHO, everyone was there. Amazing conference, and Suleiman gave the welcome remarks then. So AKU stays in your blood, I think, and that's why you come back. More conferences. Finally, just before I came in 2023, I did a United Nations side event inside the UN about advocating for adding birth defects in the agenda for maternal newborn child health. It was a forgotten thing. No one talked about it. There was a lot of focus on premature birth and low birth weight and stillbirth, but babies born with all kinds of birth defects, no one was talking about it until we launched this movement. In 2024, May 2024, I came here for my job interview for this job, then went to Geneva, and we did a side event at WHO, and so much has happened as a result of this movement. There are all these publications, you can actually look at them. There are technical work groups on birth defects. On March 3rd, 2024, World Birth Defects Day, there was a statement from Tedros, Director General of WHO. Also, this was amazing. We were in Geneva. We didn't even know that a new landmark resolution on maternal newborn child health came, and it actually mentioned the care for babies born with birth defects as a critical component of saving lives. Also in 2024, we found a new coalition for birth defects called Global Action for Congenital Conditions, and then I left. So here I am. I am a cause-driven person. I come from a very serious not-for-profit background. I look for a cause. So I came here last year, and I started a new movement, and it's known as Rise with Confidence Movement. And you see my students from Sonam always wearing these T-shirts and hats, and you're more than welcome to come and get one if you participate in our next event. So as I was preparing for this, I said, okay, I've been talking about Rise with Confidence. Is it really getting a momentum? And I put in the hashtag Rise with Confidence in Google, and AI associates this with AKU School of Nursing and Midwifery. The hashtag Rise with Confidence is primarily associated with the Aga Khan University School of Nursing and Midwifery. So use it and tag us and keep the movement going. I think this is, for me, the idea of strengthening nursing workforce. And why am I doing that? I just want to read this last quote. So why am I here? What drives me? Why this movement? His Highness Karim Aga Khan, when he found the School of Nursing here and much later, continuously talked about why we needed to do this. So he said, one of my aspirations was that the School of Nursing will achieve such a dimension in competence, in knowledge, in research, that it would become a reference point for the nursing profession in Pakistan and not just for its students. I think we've done a lot of that. We have been the reference point. We've been the first in this and that, and we now even offer PhD in nursing. We are the first to offer that. We were the first to offer MSN, but our journey continues. Pakistan still struggles significantly with its standards and status of the profession. So it continues. I leave you with this message. We talk about mentorship, we talk about growth. The butterfly says to the caterpillar, the thing is that you have to really want to change. And whatever that change is for you, you really have to want to. You have to ask for it. You have to go after it. Thank you.
Dani, for an amazing talk. I think the analogy of jungle gym resonates with a lot of us. I was thinking of the chessboard during that time. So now we can move on to our speakers. So the first is Amreen Merchant, and she's a senior instructor in the Department of Pediatrics, and her presentation is on early childhood development interventions across key areas of the nurturing care framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sidra and Dr. Zara. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, and a very warm welcome to you all. So today, I'll be presenting a systematic review and meta-analysis on early childhood development interventions across key areas of nurturing care framework done in Pakistan for children who are less than or equal to 5 years to improve child development. So child development is a global priority. More than 53% of children in LMIC, and in Pakistan around 49% of children are at risk of not attaining their developmental potential, that too when assessed via poverty and malnutrition. And the Sustainable Developmental Goal 4.2.1 states that by 2030, all children who are less than 5 years of age must attain their developmental potential or all their age-related milestones. So it's very important to look comprehensively or to synthesize all the existingly available evidence regarding the interventions that have been done in Pakistan to improve child development outcomes. And then from there to identify the key gaps which still exist. And if the evidence is showing some promising results, then take it up to the national policy so that it can be scalable and be made available for all children who are there in Pakistan. So my research objective was to conduct a systematic review and meta-analysis of early childhood development ECD interventions in Pakistan across key NCF areas aimed at improving developmental outcomes in children who are less than or equal to 5 years. So NCF, basically Nurturing Care Framework, is the term which was coined by UNICEF and WHO, and they have said that if the interventions are mapped in any of the 5 domains of Nurturing Care Framework, and together it will be there to improve child development as like a wholesome thing. So the eligibility criteria for the studies or for the published articles included participants who were there to take part in interventions for less than 5 years of age. The intervention must focus on any one or a combination of nurturing care framework. The comparator can be any of like the usual care. The outcomes included cognitive, language, socio-emotional, behavioral, physical growth, and so on. Study design could be intervention-based studies, either like randomized or non-randomized. And for that, the databases that were searched included PubMed, Cochrane, Scopus, and al. The search strategy was made by us and approved and seen by Dr. Ashraf Sharif, who is here as well. And then we used ROB tool for the randomized studies and the Robbins tool to assess the risk of bias for the non-randomized. Grade and meta-analysis are the things that we're still undergoing, and the results for which will be presented or will be disseminated in the form of paper. So this PRISMA flowchart shows that while we started the study, there were 6,757 articles were shortlisted or selected. But by the end of doing the title and abstract screening, full text review, data was extracted from 37 published articles. And from those 37 papers, there were 25 trials which were done and which we will be presenting today. So here on this graph, you can see that on the left side, all 37 published articles have been arranged in the ascending order from, depending on the year the intervention was initiated. And on the right side, you see these bars. These bars show that the longer bar means more of the NCF domains were incorporated, with the color coding also shown. So we can see that there is some trend towards more of like a combined approach with as the years have increased. In this graph, we have grouped interventions according to the 5-year intervals, and we can see a steady increase in the number of studies or the number of interventions that have been done since 2000 to improve child development. And also we see that almost all parts of nurturing care framework have been touched upon, but health and nutrition are the ones which are among the most under the focus. Some of the interventions that were identified in our study which focused on health include hygiene education, counseling sessions. For nutrition, there were nutritional supplements. For mothers, antenatally, for children who were more than 6 months of age, fresh fruit vouchers, interactive growth charts, some freshly made lunches for children who were at schools. Then the responsive stimulation included mostly like the group parenting sessions, and then the care for child development, which is there by the WHO, the Thinking Healthy program, the Learning Through Play program, Spring, ECCE, that curriculum. So all these kind of interventions have been done and have shown promising results for the child development in Pakistan. So this left donor chart, it shows that all the domains of nurturing care framework-based interventions, and we see a slight imbalance, but all of the domains have been covered. But this also shows that which areas we still need to work on. And on the right side is the bubble map, which shows the outcomes that are there across different interventions done. And we see that physical growth has been the most commonly assessed or most frequently assessed outcomes for all the interventions. Though cognition, language, motor, and socio-emotional have also been assessed evenly, but not always. So we need to keep these things also in mind while looking at this. So this is the heat map, which summarizes the significance of all the outcomes across different interventions, either alone or in combination. So in the rows, you see the cognition, language, motor, socio-emotional, parental interaction, physical growth, maternal knowledge, and in the columns, you see all the interventions as per the NCF domain: health, nutrition, early learning. Then comes the combinations. So there can be many different patterns which you can identify, but some of the very striking things that I want to present here is that if you look at the interventions that have focused on responsive stimulation or early learning opportunities, either alone or in combination, they have shown, and I'm sorry, just to go with that, before I want to explain that the green cells show the significant results and the orange ones the insignificant. So if you look at the responsive stimulation or early learning opportunities, either alone or in combination, they have been significantly improved cognition, language, motor, socio-emotional, but not so when we look at the physical growth component. They have not been able to have a significant improvement in physical growth. Whereas when we look at the nutrition, we see that the only nutrition interventions have struggled to improve child cognitive, language, motor, and socio-emotional, but have been very successful at improving child physical growth. So here we need to understand that if we keep on working in any one of the domain of nurturing care framework, we will not be able to have like a combined good outcome improving child development. And like child development without physical growth obviously is not something that we can imagine. So we definitely need to have more of a multi-domain approach. So on the very right side of this heat map, if you see, these are the studies which had either 3 or more domains when combined, and we see that the results are mixed. So maybe these studies have either been the effects have been diluted because a lot of different domains were incorporated, or maybe because they were integrated into the primary healthcare service. So this is also another very critical component that we need to take care, is that while we are combining different domains, it's very important to see that each one has its own effect right through from the start till the end, and that would definitely show then in the outcome as well. So some key takeaways. So from the provider to the parent, women are at the epicenter of impact, even at these low resource settings where many or much of these interventions were done. Though we have limited scope because the impact is also limited because interventions have mostly targeted either one or two of the NCF domains. And sometimes, as I just talked about, that there is a delivery dilution effect, that when we are trying to incorporate more of the services into the existing PHCs, then the effect goes around. I mean, the fidelity of the intervention is not the same as when it was assessed in like a controlled trial. So definitely scalability must be there, but it has to be proactive. It needs to be thought out right from the start of the design of any trial, not after the design or like not after the trial has shown improved or significant evidence. Then you think about scalability, so it's not going to work like that. Scalability always needs to be thought right from the outset of the study design. And definitely the way forward is integrated. One of the domain cannot lead to child development outcomes and like optimum growth and development. The way is definitely integrated, should be integrated into the primary healthcare systems. I would like to acknowledge my mentor, Dr. Shalina, who's not here today, but she has been like exceptional throughout. Zen, Ozan, Fatma, who have been with me throughout this review, Dr. Ashraf Sharif, and Junaid for helping me out with the visualizations. The authors who have been very generous to respond to our emails, to provide more data, to explain some of the graphs and providing other estimates. This platform, thank you so much. And obviously my department, my home, who have always believed in me and provided me and nurtured me to become who I am today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambreen, for sticking to time and also sharing a very important findings of the review with us. We will take questions towards the end of the session. So let me invite the next speaker, who is Dr. Arisha Sohail. She is an assistant professor in the Department of Biochemistry at Dow University of Health Sciences. Her research focuses on evidence-based and translational medicine with a particular emphasis on women's and child health. Today, she will be talking to us about serum lipid metabolome and hepcidin 25 levels in children 24 to 59 months with and without iron deficiency anemia. Risha, over to you.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today I'm going to present the project completed under Supporting Women in Science Fellowship, and I'm Cohort 1 Fellow. The project title is the Serum Lipid Metabolome and Hepcidin 25 levels in children of 24 to 59 months of age with and without iron deficiency anemia. So ID affects millions of children globally with 33% prevalence in Pakistan in children of age 24 to 59 months of age. However, there is a limited understanding of the metabolic shifts caused by IDA beyond hematologic insufficiency in this vulnerable age group. Therefore, understanding these changes can reveal new diagnostic markers and therapeutic targets for the non-hematological consequences of IDA. The research question. The research question is, what is the association between IDA and lipid metabolomics profile, and how do these profiles correlate with traditional IDA biomarkers in children aged 24 to 59 months of age compared to the healthy controls? The methods was the ethical approval was obtained from the University IRB committee. The study setting where the participants were enrolled from pediatrics OPD at the Dow Hospital, Ujha, Karachi. Participants were invited for the free of cost nutritional assessment, and those who agreed to participate, consent forms were filled by both parents of the participants. The study design was cross-sectional, analytical, sample size was of 100. History and clinical examination of the participant was collected by the pediatrician, and the blood samples were collected for the complete blood count and ferritin and stored at -80 degrees centigrade for further analysis for hepcidin and metabolomic analysis. The inclusion criteria for the cases were according to the WHO anemia diagnosis in the children that was HB of less than 11 and ferritin of less than 12 that was adjusted for C-reactive protein, while the exclusion criteria for both the healthy controls and the cases was any kind of hemoglobinopathy, transfusion history, chronic disease, or any kind of iron therapy. So we enrolled about 38 healthy controls who were age and gender matched with normal hematologic profiles, and about 40 cases newly diagnosed for iron deficiency anemia. The serum hepcidin was determined by the competitive C-ELISA method at Dow Research Lab. However, and gas chromatography mass spectrometabolic analysis was performed at HEJ University of Karachi for the detection and structure identification based on mass fragmentation patterns. The GCMS statistical analysis were performed using the MetaboAnalyst version 6 software. Principal component analysis and the partial least square discriminant analysis were used to visualize the metabolic separation. And the metabolite set enrichment analysis was used to map the differential metabolites to the affected biological pathways and the organs. Coming to the results and the discussion. So the children with IDA showed significantly lower body weight, but not reduced height compared to the healthy pairs. This suggests the adaptive response to conserve energy when iron supply is inadequate, especially during growth and phases. However, here you can see that hepcidin was not significantly different between the healthy controls and the IDA cases. 12 metabolites were identified as significantly different between IDA and the control groups using the univariate analysis as seen in this volcano plot, which shows the altered metabolites in IDA. Here at the upper far, these are the groups, in the red are the upregulated metabolites, and on the upper left are those metabolites which were found downregulated in the IDA cases. The PCA plot showed partial differentiation between IDA and controls, while the PLS-DLA, which is a supervised model, effectively separated the groups, revealing distinct metabolic patterns associated with each group. The variable importance projection scores were performed and which showed that the cholesterol, which is identified as metabolite number 336 and 35, that was fatty acid metabolite derivatives, contributed most to the classification between the IDA group and the control group. As you can see here that they scored more than 3. And these metabolites were found to be downregulated in the volcano plot analysis. So the reduced cholesterol synthesis or esterification and the fatty acids and derivatives in IDA group indicated disrupted lipid metabolism. Two central metabolites, that were the cholesterol and the octadecatrionic acid, were the central nodes that significantly impacted the metabolic pathways. The cholesterol was downregulated and significantly impacted the biosynthesis of the bile acid and the steroid hormone synthesis, while this metabolite called octadecatrionic acid, which is a fatty acid, significantly impacted the alpha-linoleic acid metabolism, which is important in immune responses and inflammatory responses, and the synthesis of unsaturated fatty acids, which are required for the myelination of the nervous tissue in the early phase of development. The organ level mapping was performed, and it was found that bile in the liver and the nervous tissue were the most susceptible tissues to be impacted by the downregulation of these two metabolites. The correlation analysis was performed to link the traditional IDA biomarkers to these identified metabolites, and this is the heat map showing the multivariable associations. Those in the dark red color indicate the positive correlation of these metabolites with the traditional IDA biomarkers, and those in the blue indicate the negative correlation. So this correlation analysis linked the cholesterol and the octadecatrionic acid with ferritin suggesting the metabolic crosstalk between the lipid and iron homeostasis. However, hepcidin showed moderate associations reflecting individual physiological differences and response to acute changes in iron demand. So these findings suggest impaired metabolic signaling, cognitive dysfunction, poor myelination due to disrupted metabolism of cholesterol in the nervous tissue, and malnutrition and delayed growth due to impaired bile pathway in liver in IDA group, since bile is involved in the lipid digestion, absorption, and especially the fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin A, D, E, and K. So these findings show not only the meaningful biological connections between the lipid metabolites and iron biomarkers, but also extend the interpretation of IDA beyond hematology, highlighting the wider systemic metabolic disruptions. So in conclusion, this study provides the first comprehensive GCMS profile of lipid-associated changes in this specific vulnerable pediatric age group. The identified biomarkers could be used to monitor the non-hematological efficacy of iron supplementation. The limitations for this study was that since it's an observational study, so cannot prove the causation on a single geographic population of small size. I would like to take a moment to thank my team, without whom this project would have not been completed. Dr. Amna for the lead metabolite analysis, Dr. Bushra Muiz, who is a mentor, not present here, unfortunately, who, under her guidance, I was able to conduct this project and develop this project. Vajiha, who worked really hard for the sample collection and processing, Dr. Ghulam for guiding me for the GCMS analysis, and Sayyid Muhammad Salman, manager lab services, who helped out me in the sample collection and analysis as well. A very, very special thanks to the supporting Women in Science team and all the study participants. Thank you.
Thank you, Arisha, for sticking to time in a fascinating talk. I think we learned that a lot is being offered in our city, so thank you. Over to the next speaker, Dr. Anam Rahim. She's a senior instructor in community health sciences, and her interest and work spans maternal and child health, infectious diseases, AI applications in health, and educational research. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and a very good morning. My study title is Sleep in Term and Preterm Infants at 2 years of age and Associations with Growth Status and Head Circumference Phenotype. It is a secondary data analysis from the cohort of InterBio 21st. A little background, sleep in infancy play a vital role for brain maturation and behavioral regulation. Between 2 to 3 years, the sleep transitions from brain reorganization and learning to repair and maintenance functions. The preterm infants show immature sleep-wake cycles and greater arousability, and a key anthropometric marker for brain development is head circumference growth. So smaller head circumference and small for gestational age status are seen to be associated with neurodevelopmental delays. So most studies that have been done are done in high-income countries, and they have mostly explored the association of sleep with the neurodevelopment. However, there is limited data available for low-middle-income countries, and there is limited data on, particularly on the understanding of the complex relationship between the gestational age and early growth trajectories with the sleep parameters. So my research objectives were to examine the quality and quantity of sleep among the term and the preterm infants at 2 years of age, and to explore the association of sleep and small for gestational age status and head circumference growth phenotypes and its association with sleep. So it is a secondary data analysis. The primary study was the InterGrowth 21st study, which was a prospective multi-country cohort. And then there is an extension called the InterBio 21st. So the data analysis that I did was from the cohort of InterBio 21st. The participants that were included for this analysis were those who were singleton infants with valid actigraphy data at 2-year follow-up. And there were 7 countries who participated in this. So sleep as an outcome was assessed using the Motion Watch 8. And the parameters that I analyzed were the quantity parameters that included the total sleep time, day and night sleep duration, the quality parameters, that was a day and night actual sleep percentage and fragmentation index, and the non-parametric circadian rhythm analysis, which included the relative amplitude and the intra-daily variability. So for 5 to 7 days, there was continuous recording in home settings, and the data was standardized via InterGrowth sleep-wake manual. So as you can see that children with sufficient actigraphy data were only 527, and we have excluded all with insufficient actigraphy data and empty recordings. So only 6.9 9% of the cohort was analyzed for this study. In the interest of time, I'll be only presenting a few baseline characteristics. The median maternal age at recruitment was 29 years with a BMI of 24.8 kg per meter square. And the average gestational age at delivery was 39 weeks. And we can also see that the contribution of male and female in this analysis was approximately similar. And the average newborn weight of this cohort that was analyzed was 3,030 grams. When we come to the results, first we looked at the preterm birth and the sleep outcomes at 2 years of age. First, we can see that only 18.2% were born preterm. And what we saw was higher nighttime fragmentation index among the preterm infants, and that indicated poor sleep continuity in preterm. However, there were no differences in total sleep time or 24-hour sleep rhythmicity among the preterms and terms. Then we also saw the differences of sleep outcomes at 2 years for small for gestational age born infants. And we can see here that small for gestational ages, less than 5th centile accounted for 10.8%, while those from 5th to 10th centile were 6.8%. And here we can see that small for gestational age with less than 5th centiles showed lower nighttime sleep percentages and lower intra-daily variability, and that indicates that there was reduced sleep efficiency and weaker circadian stability among the small for gestational age infants that were less than 5th centile. Then we also saw the differences of sleep outcomes at 2 years among the fetal head circumference growth phenotypes. These are the 5 phenotypes that were described. And here we can see that the early flattering head circumference phenotype accounted for 8.3%, and it shows the lowest total and nighttime sleep durations, along with the lowest actual time sleep percentages. And that indicates that there is reduced sleep efficiency and overall poorer sleep quality. And if we see the accelerating growth phenotype, which accounts for 5.3%, it has shown an optimal sleep efficiency and overall optimal sleep patterns. So we conclude here as preterm and small for gestational age infants show persistent sleep disruptions at 2 years of age, and early flattering head circumference growth is associated with poor sleep continuity. And therefore, sleep disruptions may reflect impaired neurodevelopmental maturation, and that requires further research. So here are the references, and this is my team. I would like to thank the entire team and the team of Women in Science Fellowship. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anam, for sticking to time. I mean, we're in this Women in Science conference, and as women, we wear a lot of hats, and one of them is being a mother. And if you have a toddler, sleep, I'm sure, is something all of us would cherish if a 2-year-old would sleep, and that would be related to growth. So thank you very much for sharing this. We'll call you back for questions. Our last speaker for this session is Dr. Saima Sachwani, who is an assistant professor in the School of Nursing and Midwifery at the Aga Khan University. Her research work focuses on preterm infant growth and nutrition, guided by the DOHAT framework. Her work examines how maternal health and nutrition influence early growth trajectories in preterm infants and aims to strengthen policies supporting vulnerable newborns. Today, she will be talking to us about predictive factors of weight gain among preterm newborns in the first month of life.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And I would be sharing our study that examined preterm infant growth pattern and predictive factors of growth in the neonatal period. To set the background, each year 15 million babies are born preterm globally, out of which almost 1 million lose their lives from preventable preterm birth complications. And those that survive, they face long-term adverse health consequences, which is quite alarming. When we talk about Pakistan, Pakistan ranks fourth with the highest burden of preterm birth globally, which is a very alarming situation, very high when compared to the regional countries. Preterm infants constitute a physiologically distinct set of population because of their immature organs at the time they are in the extrauterine life. However, the focus of clinical practice has been to replicate the nutritional requirement, that of the term-born infants, or the needs of the last trimester. However, when these preterm infants transition into extrauterine life, the mismatch between the intrauterine life and the extrauterine life further complicates the optimal nutritional needs and the growth outcomes. Moreover, growth assessment varies drastically. Most of the researchers focuses, and even the clinical practices, focuses on assessing weight primarily, neglecting length and head circumference, and we understand that weight is just the sum of mass, and the linear and the cerebral growth is also important to understand and evaluate using a holistic approach. There are conflicting or heterogeneous set of growth standards, references, and charts, which make it difficult to compare the growth outcome across studies. Moreover, although rapid growth is important because the short-term outcomes, but it is also important to understand it may have adverse long-term sequelae. Maternal undernutrition, micronutrition deficiencies, and overweight signify the influence of neonatal growth outcomes. Moreover, in researches, preterm infants are often neglected, which limits the evidence on this important subgroup of the population, which is a barrier to advancing Sustainable Development Goal agenda, particularly Goal 2, Zero Hunger, and the Goal 3, which refers to the health and well-being. To overcome these gaps, our research focused on assessing the growth pattern and the predictive factors of growth among preterm infant borns in urban Pakistan. And this map actually shows the graphical reach of inter-practice parent study from 14 countries. However, in our study, we use the data from Aga Khan University, Karachi, Pakistan only. We included preterm infants born between 26 to less than 37 weeks of live birth, and those whose anthropometric data for neonatal life was available and parental consent was received. So a total sample of 127 preterm infants were included in the final analysis. So when we see at our maternal characteristics, we found out that more than 50%, which means almost 64% of the women were identified having the BMI greater than 25, reflecting overweight and obesity, although the research took place from a lower middle income country context. In the sample of 127, only 2 women were identified as underweight. When we talk about the preterm infant nutritional factors, exclusive breastfeeding was the most common type of feeding, and delay in age of oral feeding start was more in infants that were born before 32 weeks of gestation. As a second objective, explored the association between maternal and preterm infant nutritional factors and growth outcomes. We did not find association between maternal nutrition and preterm infant growth. In our study, our results suggest the maternal nutrition status, as assessed in this study, doesn't have a significant impact all alone on the growth outcomes during the neonatal period. This finding points out for a further research with a larger sample and longitudinal study designs to assess those trends. In terms of infant feeding types, our results indicated no significant effect of infant feeding on growth outcomes. However, in terms of the growth outcomes, we found a marginal association between head circumference and nutrition, and that means a further studies with the larger sample can explore those associations. Our study also focused on identifying the predictive factors of the growth in the neonatal period. And although we were interested in also doing the subgroup analysis based on gestational age at birth and size at birth, but due to a limited sample, this could not be done. Additionally, we could not perform logistic rapid growth, static rapid growth assessment due to smaller number of preterm infants experiencing this growth pattern. The static growth assessment reflects only one-time single assessment at the end of the neonatal period, whereas dynamic growth assessment examines the difference in growth between birth and the neonatal period, which is more precise, more reliable to assess the effect of nutritional interventions in the postnatal period. In our study, with each day delay in the onset of oral feeding, the odds of static postnatal growth failure increased by 1.15 times, and for each year increase in maternal education, the odds of static postnatal growth failure decreased by 0.81, reflecting the protective effect. When controlling for birth z-scores of weight, head circumference, and length. For dynamic postnatal growth failure, controlling for birth z-scores, mixed milk feeding was only significant. It showed significantly lower odds of dynamic postnatal growth failure than that of the preterm infants that had taken exclusive breastfeeding. For dynamic rapid growth, after controlling the birth z-scores, a significant increase in the odds of rapid growth was observed in preterm infants who had taken mixed milk feeding compared to those who had taken exclusive breast milk feeding, highlighting a potential role of formula feeding in accelerating growth in this population. To advance sustainable global agenda and improve preterm growth outcomes in Pakistani context, it is important to focus on improving preterm infant outcomes using standardized training, pre-service and in-service sessions that can provide the evidence and standardization in the clinical practice. Also, it is important that preterm birth should be recognized as a chronic condition with routine documentation and tailored care, and urgent research is needed in lower middle income countries in the urban context as well. So using longitudinal study designs, larger sample size, so that we can have more evidence to tailor interventions in coming future. I would like to acknowledge the wonderful team of mentors that supported this wonderful work that I did. And these are the references. Thank you.
Thank you, Saima, for sticking to time. And I think newborn health is something that we are studying and we continue to study, and still there is a lot to learn. So now we can call all the speakers so that we can have questions. The audience?
Right, thank you. First of all, a big congratulations to all the fellows for achieving this feat and finishing their projects, and wonderful presentations. So my question is directed to Amreen. I think a very relevant area and such highly pertinent to a context like ours. And I was glad you talked about scaling up that also. So my question to you here is that we know that what the schooling rates in Pakistan are, and how many children go to preschool, especially in the rural settings where this problem is more pertinent. So what would you suggest that for a country like ours, what could be the strategies for delivering these interventions, especially children early and in rural settings? So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jay, for such a a relevant question. So as I mentioned in my last slide as well, that scalability and integration into the existing primary health care like or routine services would be the best answer to it. And we have certain touch points where the caregiver is bringing her child to the primary health care, which are the vaccination time points. So if we tap on these opportunities where the mother or the caregiver will bring her child at the center, we should try to make use of those opportunities instead of bringing in something new or overburden the existing healthcare system. Maybe like a 10-minute video while the women and child are waiting outside, or we should also try to think of ways of how can we use the digital media to educate mothers instead of like taking more of their time, because we are talking about those low resource settings where they are not like privileged enough, as you mentioned, to have those the pre-primary care or the pre-primary education or all those other factors that we talked about. So that was my answer to it.
Thank you. Great talks. I have questions for the two speakers who spoke on preterm births. The preterm period was not defined. So was it a range in which babies were born, different ranges of preterm, and were there any differences?
Yeah, so the preterm birth is defined as a newborn less than 37 weeks of age, and we did not categorize the preterm. It was only preterm and term differences.
Thank you. It's a very important question. So in our eligibility, we included preterm infants born between 26 because of their they could survive during that period, and less than 36 group. Our goal was, or we were interested in doing the subgroup analysis based on the gestational ages as well as size at birth. But because our sample was not adequate, so we could not do it. Yeah.
Also, a question for the two colleagues who talked about preterm birth. So Pakistan has one of the highest rates of preterm birth. I think, did you say 18% is the rate?
No, so 18% in that cohort that was analyzed
Okay.
with valid actigraphy data, not like the entire.
But in your cohort, the rate was 18%.
So the cohort which I analyzed which had sufficient actigraphy data, not the entire cohort that we took.
Okay, so I know that you were looking at the outcomes, but any thoughts on why we are in this situation in Pakistan where the preterm birth rate otherwise in the world is like what, 12, 13%? Here we are with one of the highest rates. What do you think is happening in Pakistan that's causing, I know this is not exactly the topic, but any thoughts that you can share on that?
So it's a very important question, and actually that remains still a gap in the literature in identifying what are the more tangible causes of preterm birth. So it's a multifactorial thing, but there could be several factors, like there seems a vicious cycle or a process where we identify risk women, like women with GDM, preeclampsia, all those are predisposed to those. More women of reproductive age and the pregnant women, they are entering in the pregnancy with overweight and obesity, which is again a risk factor. These give birth to the babies who are preterm birth. Preterm birth itself is an independent risk factor for the future preterm birth. So there is a cycle. More women, more population is getting overweight, obese, and on the non-communicable sequelae. But that thing is not. This is one of the reasons in our country, and we need to understand a double burden of nutrition in our context. Thank you.
So, you're right in that there are very few population-based studies of prematurity, especially those with valid measurements of gestation, which is really dating ultrasounds early in pregnancy. Intergrowth, interbio, interpractice, all of these studies were unique because they used a standardized system for assessing growth and fetal maturation, but they were selected samples and largely hospital-based samples, or selected from catchment clinics. So there were no population-based studies looking at this until recently. But guess what? Then the figures that we have from the large Benazir Nasho-Numa program evaluation that we've done, the longitudinal cohorts that have been in Dadu and Rajanpur, southern Punjab, Sindh. I've got this in front of me. I took it out for Salima. So we don't classify prematurity as a single homogeneous entity anymore. So as you know, the small vulnerable newborn categories have preterm births that can be completely appropriate for gestational age and normal birth weight. So you can be premature and above 2.5 kilos. And you can be premature and appropriate for gestational age or small for gestational age. So if you take these three categories, which are the big categories of prematurity, the prevalence at population level in this longitudinal cohort around 2,500 births over this period of time. Exactly for the intervention group and control, so you can also take the effect of the intervention within this. In the controls, which had nothing other than just the income support program being there, the prevalence is 17.8. It's actually massive. I mean, it is close to around 28% in that, which is huge. And if you take out the normal birth weight prematurity, it is appropriate for gestational age preterm, but normal birth weight, that's 10%. So a big chunk of that is this. Now, in the other group, the percentage of prevalence is just about 1% less. So there was an impact of the intervention on small vulnerable newborn births. But Salima, to answer your question, we are dealing with a massive proportion of small vulnerable births at population level, which I think average close to around 25%, 22 to 24, 25% in all estimates. And these are babies who would have a disproportionate clustering of mortality and also morbidity.
This was in Dadu?
This is Dadu and Rajanpur, longitudinal cohorts. So this is not a cross-sectional study. You see, the problem with prematurity assessment is cross-sectional studies are terrible in doing this because you have such variability of methodology. So to do this, you need to take a cohort pre-pregnancy or early pregnancy, and dating ultrasounds typically need to be done in the first trimester. And then you follow them up to birth outcomes and beyond. So this has taken us 4 years almost to organize this, just finished. So I can now give you the figures for Pakistan, at least for these two districts. But surprisingly, it is not too different from the guesstimates that people had of babies born, small vulnerable newborn characteristics. I had one quick question while I've got the mic. So, Merchant, I was very, Umbrine Merchant, right? I was very pleased by your massive review and particularly the focus on the nurturing care framework. But I wanted you to tell me, if you can, if you were able to disaggregate the studies that you looked at by study size, efficacy or effectiveness trials or studies, and similarly the grading or the quality of the evidence. Right. I might have missed that in your presentation. I arrived just as you were beginning, but how did you pool the data?
Right, so meta-analysis is still ongoing, and it is still ongoing because it is still showing a lot of heterogeneity. So among all the studies that there are, it's difficult to pool and have like a pool estimate out of it, because there has been like difference in the way that each of the outcome has been assessed. I mean, the physical growth, there hasn't been much of a variation for how it has been assessed, but regarding the development, there is quite a lot of difference from like mother reported to directly administered on child. So I'm still undergoing, I'm doing the grade assessment and the meta-analysis. So hopefully, I did mention that by the end, as I complete this analysis, those results, if inshallah I'll be able to, disseminate via the paper.
Thank you very much. I mean, great job to all the speakers to helping us generate this discussion. Thank you very much once again, and thank you for being a wonderful audience. Over to you for the next session.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Sidra and Dr. Zara, for leading this session. And I would like to request both of you and Dr. Salima Vilani to come to stage and present mementos to our very deserving fellows. Okay, Amreen Merchant. Dr. Arisha Suhail. Dr. Anam Rahim. And Dr. Saima Sachwani. Now I would request both the chairs to present the mementos to Dr. Salima Vilani. Thank you. So we now transition to session B, titled Bridging Gaps in Chronic Diseases, Research Across Lifespan. This session will be chaired by Dr. Sadaf Khan and Dr. Ambreen Fatma. So I will now introduce both the co-chairs. Dr. Sadaf Khan is a professor of surgery and associate dean of undergraduate medical education at the Aga Khan University. She is a dedicated medical educator and a consultant general and colorectal surgeon, an active member of American College of Surgeons and Society of Colorectal Surgeons. She is also recognized for her exceptional leaderships in curriculum development, educational innovation, and training of future surgeons. Our second chair, Dr. Ambreen Fatma, is an assistant professor at the Aga Khan University, where she leads a research group within the Department of Biological and Biomedical Sciences and the Center for Regenerative Medicine and the Stem Cell Research. She earned her PhD in human molecular genetics through a joint program between NIBG Pakistan and University of Copenhagen, followed by postdoctoral training at Uppsala University, Sweden. Her research focuses on genetics of neurodevelopmental and neuropsychiatric disorders, applying functional genomics, CRISPR editing, and brain organoid to uncover disease pathways. She is committed to improving access to genetic diagnosis, counseling, and precision medicine for underserved communities in Pakistan. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Sadaf Khan and Dr. Amreen Fatma to the stage to chair this session. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody, to this session on bridging gaps in chronic disease research across lifespan. It is my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Zainab Samad. Dr. Zainab Samad is the Ibn Sina Professor and Chair of the Department of Medicine at the Aga Khan University and the founding director of AQU's Health Data Science Center. She is a practicing cardiologist. She completed her residency cardiology fellowship and master's in clinical research at Duke University. Her work focuses on cardiovascular disease, epidemiology, implementation research, and strengthening data-driven, gender-inclusive health systems in Pakistan. She also co-directs the NIHR Global Health Research Center for Impact. Today, she will talk to us about, the topic of her presentation is Health for All Hearts, Integrating Gender, Science, and Systems in Cardiovascular Research. Dr. Zainab.
Thank you very much, Sadaf, and it's really a great pleasure to be speaking at this forum, and fantastic to see all those bright women sitting in the audience and male allies sitting in the front. These are my disclosures, and I want you to start off with a blank slate. Think about an important idea that I'm going to ask you to develop in your head. So think about a woman that you love, okay? And once you've thought of a woman who you love, think about how she doesn't go to regular visits with her physician, but one fine day she develops symptoms that are actually symptoms of a heart attack, and after much insistence ends up in the ER for examination. But because the textbooks that have been written in cardiovascular medicine have been written by men with research that has been done largely on men, the people who are taking care of her can't recognize her symptoms as such, and she does develop poor outcomes related to that problem in the system. So this is the story of a lot of women in our country and worldwide. But I'll actually focus on Pakistan and what we've learned about this issue over the last several years of this work. This is actually a tree map. You'll see this from the Global Burden of Disease work that's come out on health in Pakistan. And you'll see here in the column on the far right is the ranking of diseases that are causing death in our country. This is data from back in 2019. This data looks very different now. Cardiovascular disease is the #1 cause of death. So you clump ischemic heart disease and stroke, which are both cardiovascular diseases. It is the #1 cause of death in the country. And you can see different provinces doing different things in terms of the ranking. The blues and the reds and oranges represent diseases that have gone up in the last 3 decades. The greens and blues are diseases that have gone down in terms of prevalence in our country in the last 3 decades. But the whole point of this slide was to show you that cardiovascular disease is actually the leading cause of death in our country. We do have a double burden at this point. Where do women come in over here? And how does gender look in this space? Another statistic that you should be aware of, beside the fact that it is the leading cause of death in the country at this point, is that compared to global numbers, our prevalence is higher, okay, in terms of incidence. And this is for all cardiovascular diseases, okay? Includes rheumatic heart disease, hypertensive heart disease, arrhythmias, and so on and so forth. And age-standardized death rate for CVD is higher than the global average. What causes cardiovascular disease? And here I'll focus more on ischemic heart disease, the kind where your vessels narrow and you get disease from that. These are data from surveys that have been recently, and when I might say recently, in the last 10 years in Pakistan. You'll see the proximal risk factors, and not the most primordial risk factors, proximal risk factors being hypertension, diabetes, tobacco, etc. You'll notice that in the papers that published the surveys, only 2 actually pointed out the gender difference in what they were pointing out in the surveys, okay? So even the Big Step survey done in Punjab and Sindh did not report on how many men or women were included in the survey in their main paper, all right? But for Lahore and for, you'll see for the Pakistan Diabetes Survey, a pretty good representation of women. You'll see that hypertension, diabetes are highly prevalent in our population. And actually, in a survey that we recently did on mobile phones, using mobile phone data, using mobile phones, we found that women have a higher prevalence than men. At least the women that were enrolled in the study had a higher prevalence of both these risk factors compared to men. Now, these are known risk factors, like the big ones. You've got to detect them and treat them so that you increase time to first cardiovascular event, okay? But in this audience that's filled with women, I'd like to ask you if you know that there are sex-specific risk factors that specifically apply to women or not. We just had a panel that talked about premature births, small for gestational age, IUGR. All these actually are representatives of cardiovascular risk in women, okay? And the pregnancy is giving you that window into that risk. These are not widely known, but you women in the audience should know these. Late menarche, early menopause, these are all sex-specific risks. Preeclampsia during pregnancy, gestational diabetes during pregnancy, gestational hypertension during pregnancy are sex-specific risks. And so is breast cancer, okay? So this is my mind map of why cardiovascular disease has gone up. You'll see another mind map in a few slides. But what we've got is background genetic risk. Our country has a very high rate of consanguinity, and probably gender marginalization has something to do with that. 58% people married to their first or second cousins. Then you've got how urbanization is happening in Pakistan. We've got commercial determinants. I mean, it's kind of hard to look away from a packet of chips when 24/7 commercials pushing in your and your children's face. You've got tobacco, high rates of tobacco, mental stress, poor food choices, smoking, and high sugar intake all around us. And when you combine that, you get proximal risk factors of hypertension, diabetes, smoking, high cholesterol. And then look at the spaces that we live in. Karachi is the archetype kind of city which will promote disease. You have streets that are not walkable. There's hardly any green cover, very few parks. The air pollution itself is a cardiovascular risk. And the security actually poses an additional risk. Women are not going to get on the streets to walk, take a walk for like the 30-minute walk a day, right? They're not going to do that. And so add all of those risks, and you'll get, most times, the first event that'll prompt someone to go to a physician, and that'll be an acute MI, which is a heart attack. In our mobile phone survey, which we are still to reveal in the next couple of days, we found that women were less educated than men. This is known facts. Far lower in terms of employment, lower in terms of healthcare access, but higher in terms of burden of NCDs, okay? Hypertension, self-reported hypertension, diabetes was much higher compared to men. But they were very few in numbers in our survey. It meant another major access risk, okay? They don't own the phone. If they do own the phones, they will not pick up the phone. And me as a cardiologist at this time, standing in front of you, I put myself in my shoes as an 18-year-old. No, I was not allowed to pick up the phone, okay? All right? So I'm just telling you that this, the empowered women sitting in this room may not be representing what sits in Pakistan, all of Pakistan. So what do you do when you've got this kind of a problem? You start with what you have in your hand. What's the data at Aga Khan University Hospital telling us about the care of women and their outcomes here? And AKU, I wouldn't say is highly represented the city, but it'll definitely give you the tip of the iceberg situation. Okay, for 23 million people sitting in this city, we've got a pretty large catchment area. So one of the first studies that we did looking at data at AKU was on acute MIs. We took 14,000 index admissions of acute MIs over 30 years and looked at what happened over there. And what we found was that MIs have gone up. A number of beds has not increased in this hospital, MIs went up. But the mortality has gone down. The only big other issue that we found, and it's a big issue that we unpacked over a few years, is the fact that you know that there are two kinds of MIs, right? There's a non-ST elevation MI and the ST elevation MI. The ST elevation MI that has like frank EKG markers has to be taken at the cath lab immediately. That will result in death if that's not done fast enough. In that situation, women had higher mortality compared to men. That's the far left graph you see there, across 3 decades. This is data over 3 decades. Kind of hard to find in an LMIC. What we did then was we said, okay, fine, PCI did not exist. The primary percutaneous intervention didn't exist before 1990, 1999, 93. So we'll look at the data from last 2 decades to unpack this gender problem that we found. And what you'll see over here is, this is the table 1 from that paper that we're having a hard time publishing because it's a single standard study. But you'll find that women were 30% of the cohort, and they were generally older than men at their presentations. Women more often presented with non-ST elevation MI compared with ST elevation MI, and they were more likely to have diabetes and hypertension compared to men. But you notice an important other issue here, and you see here that they were less often given or had a cardiac catheterization or a percutaneous intervention or CABG. And even after you adjusted for all this, they're also more likely to have acute kidney failure and acute respiratory failure. The rates of cardiogenic shocks are the same between men and women. All right? And this is a story that tells itself again and again. Another large cohort within NICBD of 20,000 patients undergoing primary PCI had female sex as an independent risk factor for mortality. We found the same issue. We had higher mortality for women, independent of all the other things that we could adjust for. This is the adjusted model, and you can see in non-STEMI, the difference does not exist, but in STEMIs, it does. We unpacked this a little bit more. Why is it that this is happening? And what we did from the 20,000, 2 decades data, we pulled the last decade's data because we had discharge summaries available for that. We did not go and do chart review. We created natural language processing tool that actually went and pulled the symptoms from the discharge summaries to see what was happening. And what you'll find here, very interesting and important points, is that women had higher odds of presenting with shortness of breath, abdominal pain, nausea, epigastric pain, the kinds of symptoms that nobody is going to necessarily think MI first, okay? And they also are more likely to present with this thing called ghabrahat, which is the sense of impending doom, far more than men did, and probably correctly so, given what was happening with them. Women were also less likely to be prescribed statins and much lower prescription of beta blockers, which perhaps in hindsight is not a bad thing, because now, after almost 30 years of prescribing beta blockers to people after MIs, we realize that that may not be a good thing for women, okay? That's a big trial that just came out. We've unpacked this more to understand what the lived experience is, and through a qualitative study led by one of our fantastic medical students, Honena Abed. This was a study done across NICVD and AKU, and what you'll find is that there is a whole aspect of the person showing up to the hospital, right? They have to first recognize their symptoms for what they are. And we often found both men and women were not recognizing their symptoms. Even with chest discomfort, they were like, oh, this is reflux, so this is something else. Then they were going to doctors who completely failed to recognize that these symptoms are actually a heart attack. They went to 2-3 different doctors, was prescribed Ryzik, which is the favorite medicine, kept coming up and again. And finally, when Ryzik was not doing the trick, they actually ended up in the hospital. But before they went to the doctor, women were constantly hesitating. They were constantly thinking, oh, my husband's gonna come back from work. My symptoms have been happening since he left in the morning, but when he comes back from work, he is the one who convinced them to take them to the hospital. Often, their sister or their aunt or someone else had to be the one telling them, look, or let me take you to the hospital. That's how they ended up. Men were often at work, and it was usually a coworker. They also delayed symptoms care seeking. It was usually a coworker telling them, oh, somebody I know had a heart attack, symptoms similar. My dad had it. Let's go to the doctor. Let me take you there. And when they showed up, generally, after multiple doctors who send them the wrong way, they end up getting care at both NICVD and AKU in a pretty good format. We also interviewed physicians in both these places. Both the physicians understood. Now, these are cardiologists and residents. They knew the symptom differences between MI and presentation. But financial considerations were far more important to men than women, okay? And that affected the kinds of choices and treatment decisions that they opted for themselves. This is the kind of work that we all need to be doing to unpack what it means to be a woman in our society, and how does that affect how we seek care and the care that we get. Here is another conceptual framework that I created. So my mind map is a little convoluted, and you'll probably get an idea of how it works. But what I try to get you is right at the top of the map, you'll see gender marginalization, which leads to low education levels, the preference for men in the household. You'll get consanguinity as another factor that goes with that, poor access to preventative care, and then you've got a whole slew of things that actually affect how we take care of what promotes disease in our societies. And then once you get disease, how that disease is taken care of. I told you the far end of the left spectrum, which is when you finally get disease, how do you get taken care of? But all of it is affected by both sex and gender. So what this problem that I kind of gave you a very little bit, iceberg shot, actually has to be dealt with and unpacked at multi-sectoral and multidimensional levels, beginning with our own communities and workforce. So if you start off with men and women, you talk about the fact that they're not health literate, they don't recognize their symptoms, they don't go for regular checkups to visits. By the way, we found that in the MI qualitative study. Then you've got to get care of them in the places where you'll find them. For women, you'll find them at home. So there was a model of care that actually worked in our society, in our communities, and that was the COBRA BPS model. if you want to reduce the incidence of MIs in a community, you should work on hypertension. I was told that by one of my mentors, who was now the former US FDA commissioner. They worked on hypertension. We worked on hypertension through an implementation study of the COBRA BPS trial. And in that, the lady healthcare workers, again, women in the community, would go and actually work with the household members on educating them about cardiovascular risk, checking their blood pressure, and referring those who had high blood pressure to the local doctors. So this is a model of care that was not necessarily made with a gender lens, but it came out to be highly gender specific. Most of the women enrolled in both our implementation trial that's now currently ongoing and in the original COBRA BPS were predominantly women. So in this trial, we are looking at multiple aspects. We're looking at education of the women and the household members about disease, making sure that they're detected and screened and actually referred to the physicians in the BHUs, and the physicians know how to treat them. The specific guidelines that we made for the physicians, and I'll tell you, often these guidelines for hypertension care are often gender agnostic. Only in the last iteration of guidelines have we put down, oh, make sure that the woman is not pregnant before you prescribe an ARB, which is an angiotensin receptor blocker for hypertension care. Why would you think that's important? Because this is something, this is our reality. There's very little use of contraception. And you're going to go ahead and give somebody a combination pill for hypertension care. She's 38 years old. She's going to go get pregnant and not know till she shows up full term and with a problem with the baby. There's renal dysgenesis associated with these drugs. So we made sure that in our protocol, we specifically pointed out these gender aspects for training. This is all the work that's going on, and our team is doing fantastic work. There's some work around the pamphlets that we use for home health education, blood pressure screening, and the lady healthcare workers, which are the leaders of the community and the important arms of this work. Their training is shown in these slides here. Another aspect, this is from a research perspective and how you take care of people in the community and how are you gender specific in that work as well. But another aspect is our physicians need to be highly aware of sex differences and gender differences in what they are taking care of every day in and out, right? But we found in our medical curriculum that only 2 or 3 spots where we had a very explicit mention of sex and gender. Well, we are in the process, Dr. Sadaf Khan is part of the project, where we are evaluating our curriculum and in a highly intentional and explicit fashion introducing the concept of sex and gender. We want physicians who come out of our medical school, as well as Khyber Medical University, which has something like 30 medical schools attached to it, that the people who come out know for a fact how to treat men and women differently if there is a treatment difference that's required, and that they know the differences between presentation and pathophysiology of disease here. We are also extremely intentional in making sure that the research workforce that comes around that looks from a science and system perspective at some of these problems is gender intentionally equal, okay? We made sure that in our large program that we are developing research leaders like in the Swiss program, that we have an equal representation of women in our trainees, but also in the faculty that provide the training for this program. And that is across the Center for Impact, which is a large initiative across Pakistan, as well as the Fokuri International Center grant that we house within AKU. These are some of our long-term trainees. You can see very good gender representation and the kinds of topics that they've chosen to pursue in terms of non-communicable diseases. So at the end of this story that I've shared with you, I'd like to leave you with a few thoughts. Sex and gender differences in disease presentation, management, pathophysiology, they exist. If you don't point at them, you won't see them. And the absence of knowledge does not mean that that does not exist, that the difference does not exist. Seeing requires the right lens, and you've got to get your gender lenses on. Having the right people ask the right questions, so please make sure that your workforces are gender equal. and what they learn, so that the projects that they do have a clear gender lens. They're not producing abstracts with no aspect of gender mentioned in them, and that the solutions that they come up with are co-developed and co-implemented, are done with the community in mind, from the community to the hospital with the sex and gender lens in mind. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Zainab. What we'll do is hold the questions till the end. So we're going to go on to sort of our next section of the program, where there will be protocol presentations. We will have a series of speakers, and may I request you to keep your presentation to 5 minutes. So.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Zainab, for such an important and inspiring work. So our first fellow speaker is Dr. Myra Riaz. She's assistant professor, pediatric endocrinology and diabetes from NICH, and she have over 20 years of experience in pediatrics, medical education, and clinical research. And she is currently doing her second fellowship in pediatric diabetes and endocrinology. And today she'll be talking about glycemic control in type 1 diabetes.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Hello, good morning, everyone. Thanks for the nice introduction. And I would like to present my data about the glycemic control in children and adolescents with type 1 diabetes. It's basically a comparison of glucose sensing devices and the conventional method of finger pricking, self-monitoring of blood glucose. So we all know that type 1 diabetes mellitus is an autoimmune disease, and it is the most common type of diabetes in pediatric and adolescent, and with an incidence of 15 per 100,000 in Asia. We all know that achieving optimal glycemic control in pediatric population with type 1 diabetes is very cumbersome, and it is important to prevent complications, though it is it's not really very easy when it is about children. So frequent monitoring of blood glucose is the major key thing that is important in achieving and maintaining the normoglycemia in type 1 diabetes. And for that, we have the conventional flash glucose monitoring. We have conventional flash glucose monitors, as well as the new emerging glucose sensing techniques. And among them, we have flash glucose monitors, as well as the continuous glucose monitoring devices, which are now standard practice worldwide. So they are more superior to the conventional finger pricking method, as they offer several advantages over traditional self-monitoring of glucose. They are minimally invasive, and they provide real-time interstitial glucose readings and trend information. So our research objective was to assess the effectiveness of flash glucose monitor and manual checking with the finger pricking method in achieving glycemic control among children and adolescents with type 1 diabetes in a public sector hospital. We recruited patients from our diabetic clinic with high HbA1cs, and we switched them to the device technique, the glucose sensing method, and we followed them for 3 months. Then we compared the pre and post device HbA1cs of those patients. We evaluated around 16 patients with a mean age of 11.5 to plus minus 1.93 years with a slight male predilection. Here we can see in the preliminary results that mean HbA1cs have been improved over the 3 months after placing them on flash glucose monitoring devices. This is the line graph, which also here we can see that individual HbA1cs have improved, the glycemic control have been improved after the devices have been placed. So the data I just presented here suggests that switching to the glucose sensing devices with type 1 diabetes improved the overall glycemic control when we followed them after 12 weeks of placing the devices. Obviously, we need the large scale studies and a longer follow-up. The cost is always been an issue in a low and middle income countries like Pakistan. So around 25,000 per month is the cost of these flash glucose devices. in Pakistan as compared to the conventional finger pricking method of checking the glucose. It is 8,000 only. So, but when we compare when we compare and consider the health benefits associated with the reduced morbidity due to better glycemic index, better glycemic control in patients with the who are using the glucose sensing devices, we may argue that the economic value is better as compared to the conventional method of glucose checking. These are the references of my presentation. Thank you very much. Me and my head of the department from the recently celebrated World Diabetes Day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Dr. Nosheen Fatma. Dr. Nosheen Fatma is a consultant of nuclear medicine at the Aga Khan University and a full-time professor at Dow University of Health Sciences. With over 200 research publications and multiple awards, she is recognized for her contributions to medical education and scientific research. She is currently completing the SWS Fellowship, further advancing her work in innovation and academic leadership. The topic of her presentation is cancer-related distress and cerebral glucose metabolism in lymphoma patients. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Nosheen. Before starting my presentation, I just want to take the opportunity to thank IGHD team. I just wanted to share that how the SWS Fellowship transformed my career. I enrolled in this the SWS Fellowship. I was assistant professor at AKU, and due to the unexpected, that is the complexity of my project, and I took the jungle gym that Dr. Salima recorded and become the full professor, and I'm honored to share that I'm the first female professor in nuclear medicine in Pakistan working at DOS. Thank you, IGHT team and Professor Bhutta. So this is my flash presentation, so I have to follow the speed of the flash. So impact of the cancer-related distress estimated by the distress thermometer on cerebral glucose metabolism to see the treatment outcome on the lymphoma patient. As you know, the reported incidence of the cancer-related distress in the cancer survivor is 40%. And the National Comprehensive Cancer Network Distress Thermometer and its problem list has been validated and adopted as a measure to identify the negative effect of the cancer-related distress. So keeping this background, my research objective to see the impact of the negative effect of the cancer-related distress on the treatment outcome of the lymphoma patient by two parameters: the distress thermometer scoring, which is subjective and objectively validated on glucose metabolism on FDG PET scan, which is performed routinely on the baseline staging. It was a prospective cohort and which was done Department of Radiology PET CT section, Karachi, Pakistan, and total 121 lymphoma patients were recruited who were referred for the FDG PET scan for staging, and they were excluded those who having the non-neurological deficits and advanced age more than 75. All patients were followed after receiving the chemotherapy with the median follow-up 14 months, and unfortunately 5 excluded due to loss to follow-up and leaving the final cohort of 116. So this is a method that how the patient did score the level of the distress. This is a manual scoring by the NCCN distress thermometer, which is the most updated version of 2024, that patient has to score the level of the distress according to the Likert scale from 0 to 10. And they have to mark the list on the checkpoint list for their problem list, which is contributory factors for the level of the distress. This is the subjective scoring. Now, what is the main objective to validate this data on the glucose metabolism? The PET scan, which is performed the FDG, and the glucose is a normal substrate for the brain metabolism. So the truncated brain images were extracted, and they were further normalized and segmented by using the statistical parametric mapping. And the further glucose quantification was done by a standardized uptake value ratio by drawing the region of interest on 9 predefined area of the brain by keeping the pons as reference. So in the results, the patient mean age was 46, male predominance, and the non-Hodgkin lymphoma significantly higher proportions. 32 patients found to have the recurrence, and unfortunately, 13 patients were died because of unknown reasons, for all reasons, sorry. Okay, so the first result finding is the associations of the cancer-related distress on the distress thermometer scoring. We found the score, the DT score 4 and above, and the problem list, the ratio more than 1.3 is a significant predictor of the negative outcome in the lymphoma patient. And on the post hoc, what we have found that is emotional factors, physical factors, and the social factors are the main contributions for causing the patients the cancer-related distress. So this is the subjective, the parameter and the scoring. So what we have done, we validated these scorings on the glucose metabolism, and we found on the ROC curve that is those who having the high distress score, they're having the negative glucose metabolism on 3 areas of the brain, which are amygdala, hippocampus, and ventromedial prefrontal cortex, that validating the high distress score having the significant associations of the negative glucose metabolism. Kaplan-Meier survival plot, we found that those who having the high distress score more than 3 in a green line having the significant poor survival outcome, that means the higher chances of the recurrence as compared to those who having the low distress score in the blue line. This data is further validated in the machine learning, and we found 82.6% accuracies on the training sets and 83.3% on the validation set with the minimum overfittings with the good generalization. So in the literature review, that is a non-factors, that is a cancer-related distress having the negative or the down regulations on the cancer-mediated immune response, and also having the primarily hippocampal impairment. And our reference study also quoted that there is a significant decreased glucose metabolism, but the major limitation in that study, it was a retrospective trial. It's not validated with the distress scoring, and number 2, the limited data point. So this is a first in kind of the study which is performed in Pakistan, and it supports its novelty of this project. So the conclusion, the negative effect of the cancer-related distress, the DT score more than 3 is a significant predictor of the negative lymphoma outcome, and it is being validated on the negative glucose metabolism on the FDG PET scan. It supports its clinical implication as one of the prognostic indicator in the cancer management. And here, my team has designed a very friendly and a very comprehensive English and Urdu version of the NCCN distress thermometer scoring for the better understandings in the clinics, so the patient can score easily this is scoring. So this is the new era for the multi-centric trials, and we have designed to propose in the different centers to assess the level of the distress scorings in the clinical practice. So thank you very much. This is my project team, and I would like to acknowledge my mentor, Professor Mohammad Wase, and the co-authors, Professor Masih Zaman, and all the project teams for the immense support, and particularly the IGHT. They supported me in all steps. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nausheen, for this amazing work. So our next speaker is Dr. Sabah Samreen. She is assistant professor at Department of Rheumatology, Foundation University of School of Health Sciences, and she's have a lot of grants in her credit, and she is presenting challenging and barriers in the care of rheumatoid arthritis in Pakistan.
Thank you so much. I'm Dr. Sabah Samreen. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, IGHT, as well as Aga Khan University for providing us with the opportunity. Since everybody's talking about the curving paths they took and the jungle gym thing that's been going on since morning. So I'm really happy to share that ever since this happened, the Swiss Cohort 2 experience that I had, it opened up new pathways, and I'm lucky to be the focal person for WHO for the COP-CORD, which collects the epidemiological data for the prevalence of rheumatic diseases across the urban and rural population in Pakistan. So thank you so much, Aga Khan University. This project is really close to my heart because it's going to bring forward the challenges and barriers that one is going to face in the care of rheumatoid arthritis across Pakistan. For me, the qualitative survey conduction was something that I still find myself really naive at, and it's an extreme learning opportunity for me. Some of the really interesting facts that I'd like to share with everybody today is that we all know that rheumatoid arthritis, amongst all the inflammatory arthritis, stays as one of the most common immune-mediated disorder affecting the joints. It's extremely debilitating, and is one of the leading causes of disability when we talk about autoimmune disorders affecting the joints. A really important fact is that one of the key time areas where one has to actually act forward is the window of opportunity. That is the first 6 months where the disease sets in. So that time is often ignored. The person is not diagnosed and ends up with a long-term disability. This time period identification actually requires the timely diagnosis, and for that we need to look at the prevalence data coming from our area so that various actions can be put forward to. Globally, it affects roughly around 1 to 2% of the population. The prevalence is lowest in Asia, and half of this actually emanates from the fact that the prevalence data pools coming from Asia are really scarce. The prevalence data stays around 0.9 to 1.8%, and there have been only 2 prevalence data pools coming from Pakistan, one in the northern Pakistan and another done in Lahore just 2 years back. So these are really small cohorts, and hopefully we'd be extending them to the wider population soon. So the research objectives were to identify the challenges and barriers in the care of rheumatoid arthritis as perceived by patients and rheumatologists in Pakistan. Another important fact is that up until 2015, there were only 15 rheumatologists working in Pakistan. To date, not even a single pediatric rheumatologist. And if I'm talking about 15 rheumatologists in Pakistan, that means that 188 million population at that time, that would mean 1 rheumatologist serving a population of 9 million people then. Now, 10 years forward, we are in 2025. Any thoughts on what is the number of rheumatologists in Pakistan? It has risen only to 100, and the population soaring again. So the numbers and the population, the ratios and proportions of these, they do not change any further. So again, 1 rheumatologist per 9 to 10 million population would mean there is a lot that needs to be done and to be changed. So this particular research project is going to look at the barriers and challenges faced by the rheumatologists as well, the kind of population that they are actually facing, the sort of challenges they have in their practice as well. And the phase 2 of this would be to determine the impact of an educational intervention. We are going to try 3 different methods and to compare the various modalities in patients with RA. This is going to be a pilot project which is going to be hinged with it. We are going to look at one of the frameworks, which is the call to action framework by Graham and colleagues, in which we are going to actually identify the key challenges and barriers, and sidewise going to test the interventions and see how the cycle goes, and hopefully would be bringing something fruitful on the table by the next year.
Dr. Samreen, you have 1 minute.
Yes. The eligibility criteria would include, actually included all of those people who had 16 years, age greater than 16 years. They were identified as those suffering with rheumatoid arthritis as per ACR-EULAR criteria. The qualitative survey part actually is going to be conducted in 3 tiers. We are already on to the first tier evaluation, which is going to be a focus group discussion. We are done with the pilot evaluation of this survey. We have a plan to conduct it across Pakistan in the major areas where rheumatology services and patients are actually coming over. We are done with LRH Peshawar and Islamabad by now. While we have developed the data flow up until now has been development of interview guide, as well as the pilot testing into the focus groups coming from Peshawar and Rawalpindi. We rigorously tested the interview guide in the pilot study, and we have now modified it as well. These are the preliminary quantitative statistics coming up. And one of the really important resounding thing over here is that most of the people, like all of the people who were coming into the pilot cohort, they were females. So we don't see most of the males walking into the clinics. Somehow females coming up with late disabling and debilitating rheumatoid arthritis. And the various psychometric scales that we tested, most of them tested really well. We are going to remove one of them, which is the BRS. So just a brief overview of the various themes we have identified. We have identified the diagnostic challenges, accessibility issues, financial barriers, medication-related barriers, health system-related limitations, and patient-related factors, again, involve behavioral issues as well as lack of awareness across especially the rural population, then psychosocial and daily life impacts that the people had to report. We actually uncovered a number of myths and superstitions, especially in those people who were living in far-off KPK areas. Then again, rehabilitation and support deficiencies, communication gaps, and follow-up and monitoring issues, widely prevalent across the cohorts that we tested. So this is an ongoing project. We are going to run the one-to-one interview over the rheumatologists as well as the stakeholders. And that's pretty much it. I would like to thank everybody who has been a part of this project with me, my mentor, Angela Megova, who's the president of AFLAR, then people working with me at FUSH, and then the AKU team as well. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sabha. Last but not least, to round off this wonderful session, we have Dr. Sonia Samin. Dr. Sonia Samin is a trained epidemiologist and biostatistician at AKU. She leads national and international projects on aging, mental health, and life course epidemiology. She is a member of the WHO Life Course Network. Currently, she is senior instructor at community health sciences at Aga Khan University, and she is going to talk to us about the geriatric populace of Sindh, urban-rural epidemiology of older adults.
Good morning and Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Dr. Sonia Samin. Thank you for the kind introduction, Dr. Sadaf. So just want to introduce my topic to everyone, which is the geriatric populace of Sindh, comparative urban-rural epidemiology. We've developed an acronym for it, which is GPSCure. My mentors are Dr. Mohammad Masood Kader and Dr. Murad Musa Khan, who are not in attendance today, but I'm very grateful for their guidance and support. So I just want to mention, start off with a brief sort of background of aging in Pakistan. Pakistan's older adult population is rising rapidly. We're standing at an estimate of roughly 10 million at the moment, which is approximately 6.5% of our total population. Our life expectancy has increased from 1950 from 34 years to now 68 years in 2025. But I think it's really important to understand that longer lifespans don't necessarily mean that you are aging in a healthy way. Older adults in Pakistan have a high disease burden, social isolation, financial dependency, and limited access to geriatric care. 90% have at least one chronic condition and 42% have multimorbidities. And unfortunately, older adults are largely missing from our national surveys. There are major gaps in age-specific data, which obviously impede the development and implementation of effective interventions. So urban-rural differences in health and well-being are poorly understood, and that's exactly the reason why we initiated this. So to briefly go over the methods, this is a community-based cross-section survey. Our two study settings are Karachi and Thatta. And the study population that we're taking are older adults who are age 60 years and above and have been residents in their respective setting for more than 5 years. Our sample size is roughly 50 older adults. We're using multi-stage cluster sampling, using proportional to probability proportion to size sampling, and recruiting almost maximum 2 older adults per household. And the urban-rural ratio that we're going to be recruiting is 2:1. Our data collection is non-invasive. We're using an interview-based questionnaire, and it's currently ongoing. The results that I'm presenting are roughly 10% of what we've collected so far. The data analysis that we're going to be going over is obviously descriptive statistics. We're going to be showcasing some of the urban and rural comparisons. And the goal with this data is to do principal component analysis to construct a composite health score, which is then going to be able to help us understand and profile the health profile of the people in our two respective settings. We're also going to do regression analysis to identify any associated determinants. So these are some of the domains that we're going to be capturing data on. So we've divided them into social demographic factors, medical nutritional factors, as well as social and environmental factors. I will not be presenting all of them, but just in the interest of time, we had to sum it down to a few. So when it comes to the social demographics, in Karachi, so far, the mean age that we have is around 67, and in Thatta, which is around 69, 68.90. We do have a predominantly male sample in Karachi and a predominantly female sample in Thatta. The majority in both cities reported a total family income of less than pre-care 50,000, which is relatively concerning. And residents in both settings largely received no formal education and were not currently employed. Going into some of the cardiovascular disease indicators that we did, we used the Interheart modifiable risk score. If you see the difference in Karachi and Thatta, most individuals in Karachi are at a higher risk. as compared to Tata, in which most of them are at a moderate risk. When it comes to hypertension, most individuals in Karachi are at a hypertensive as compared to those in our rural setting. And all of these findings somewhat align with previous studies that we have in reported literature. So these are two of the mental health determinants that we have been recording data on. There's depression and anxiety. What's one particularly interesting finding that in Karachi, there is no one that falls in the normal category of depression. There's almost at least anyone that has reported symptoms of mild depression. And then in Tata, you have a relatively better sort of spread, with most people reporting mild symptoms as compared to our urban setting. We did a very simple nutritional assessment as well using the mini nutritional assessment scale. In Karachi, you can see that most of our individuals are normally nourished as compared to our rural counterpart, in which most are reflecting the possibility of being at risk of malnutrition. And when it comes to BMI as well, in your urban spaces, it's very, very reflective that in urban spaces, our BMIs are higher as compared to those in our rural settings. In terms of mobility, in Karachi, there was a larger sample that was obviously fully independent, and then there are some as well who are moderately independent as well. About the results in for the intrinsic capacity in comorbids, for the intrinsic capacity, we assessed the score using the ICOPE tool, which was developed by the WHO. And in Karachi, you will notice that there are some, the larger proportion that we have reports moderate decline as opposed to those who are in our rural counterpart. And then also about the comorbids, these are the self-reported diagnosed health issues that our participants observed, which are pretty consistent in both settings. So the key takeaways in the way forward, urban-rural disparities in our country are definitely more evident as opposed to in other countries, particularly in the West. Be it indicators of health, nutrition, mental well-being, all of them show a significant difference in both. And like I said, this is just a very small sample result that I'm actually presenting right now. Once we have our complete data set, we do anticipate a different and more interesting sort of spread. So what we aim to do is provide very critical baseline evidence for program design and implementation. And we really want to advocate for integrated geriatric care and health systems, develop community-based interventions targeting overall older adult health and well-being, and build detailed age-specific health data repositories to enable precise analysis and evidence-driven decisions. Because the goal at the end of the day is healthy aging is not just about living longer, it's about living better. Just a sort of like huge thank you to my mentors who are not in attendance today, as well as my entire study team, some of who are here today. None of this would have been possible without them. So Dr. Mohammad Masood Qadir and Dr. Murad Musa Khan, and then my study team, Rachna, Rashida, Tahir, Adil, Afshan, Abda. Thank you so much for your support, and thank you so much to the IGSD team for catering to all those requests during this entire time. So thank you so much for this opportunity to present.
Thank you very much. That was a very interesting round. Could I perhaps ask all the speakers to come up to the front of the stage for your, you know, not the firing squad kind of thing, but for questions? And Dr. Zen? Dr. Zen, yeah. If there's no chair, we'll get one. It is a chair. So if I could start with a question. This is for Dr. Zainab. At the hospital where I trained, the division head for cardiology all evening was having chest discomfort, and he tried all kinds of things and finally wondered aloud to his wife, what else can mimic an MI? And his non-physician wife said, an MI, at which point he went to the hospital, got cath, and then lived to tell the tale. So what do you think about that? And you showed a lot about that, but it's obviously deeper than the ordinary.
So, you know, after the presentation, I was talking to Dr. Butta about, you guys must have heard about the 3 delays model, right? It's often used for pregnant women seeking care, but I think it applies to a lot of different conditions, especially where there are archetype emergencies, right? And so we find that symptom recognition when we were looking, we actually did the qualitative study to really get at gender differences. But what we found was that we found gender differences in specific areas of that journey. And we didn't find a lot of gender difference in the self-awareness of symptoms and the acuity that you ascribe to your own symptoms. We are physicians here. We've had multiple stories of our peers having symptoms and having gone to bed thinking, oh, this is just, I had a big meal at the shadi, so this is probably what it is, and then dying in their sleep or waking up and then having sudden death. Oh, this is probably reflux, let me go to bed. Their wives often tell them, let's go seek care, and they're like, no, let's just blow this off. That happens to men. And then the other thing also happens to women. The women do the same thing. When men will probably voice their symptoms and they will get convinced by their wives to go or their daughters or sisters. And women need a lot more convincing that this is something important and they need to actually seek care. The problem additionally with women is that they'll have symptoms that are not necessarily pain, right? From a health system perspective, I can tell you women have shown up in the emergency room. I won't tell you which hospital. They've shown up with something like epigastric pain, which you and I would say this is, this is probably reflux. And they didn't get an ECG till they went into heart block, sitting in the department of emergency for about 6 hours. Okay, by that time, there's nothing that can be done. So that's the kind of thing, besides symptom awareness, where you think this is a problem, I need to seek care, there's also the piece of the fact that there's symptom differences, and that's also where we lose footing on the part of the patient as well as on the part of the physician.
Any questions?
Dr. Sadaf. Okay. Now, first of all, I'd like to congratulate Dr. Nosheen for her brilliant work, remarkable work. I have a question to Dr. Sonia, that are you looking at the cognitive function of the elderly population? Or if you are, what kind of tool you are using? And maybe if you are not, we could add some tools to look at the cognitive function, because that's going to be very important in addition to depression and anxiety scores, MMSE or other scores. I think that would be very important and very useful for future studies.
Thank you, Dr. Vase. I hope I'm audible. So yes, to answer your question, we are taking some indicators on cognition as well. Some are part of the ICOPE tool, and then there's some indicators that are part of other tools as well, which I couldn't present again, like in the interest of time. But yes, we are collecting some data. Obviously, it's not going to be as detailed because this is a community-based survey, but then we do have some indicators, and I would love to discuss them with you maybe, if you're interested.
Yes. Right. So thank you, everyone, for these great presentations. So my question is directed to Dr. Sabha. So you're working on this area which is largely ignored in our settings, and what we are seeing more and more patients coming with this rheumatoid arthritis. So what do you suggest what could be done in a context like ours, which could improve those early screening and early identification of cases, and how can we ensure compliance of these, because this requires regular follow-ups and medications. So what could be done that we could do for the people who need this most?
Well, thank you so much, Dr. J. It's a really, it's a question which has so many facets to it. What we can do is, like, from patient's perspective, from awareness perspective, from rheumatologist perspective, there is a lot to be done. But starting at the grassroots level, I know it's not easy to produce as many rheumatologists in the next 10 years as well. So I guess empowerment of those people who are the first person seeing the patient. We already are doing a few awareness programs. That's another thing going on. We are going to later patch it up with this project as well. So I guess empowering those people who are working in the primary healthcare facilities as well as the rural areas, the GPs, making them aware. We have already made up a small, a pilot tool that we are testing. We have started encouraging them to identify the early findings of simply pain, swelling, stiffness, and tenderness. These 4 signs, if you pick them up on time, you are probably doing the right thing and identifying 90% of the patients clinically, though we do not resort to serology for most of the patients. So I guess these sort of quick action tools, they might help GP or the primary care physician to identify these patients first. And again, those questions like, drug verification, adherence, compliance, and surety, one of the commonest things that we do in our clinics is often asking patients to bring them leaflets of the, drugs that they are taking, and just to virtually verify them if they are taking them rightly. And I guess that is, such a grassroots level sort of thing that has to be incorporated very early into the training. And as for the GPs, WHO has also allowed empowering them to start methotrexate, the only first immunosuppressant that might be safe for them to start over. So drug verification and compliance can be done with very small tips and tricks. And I guess later on, forcing it onto the greater population would be a very tedious task. But yes, small tips and tricks like this, probably.
I want to add one comment to that question as well. You might want to explore the ECHO model. The ECHO model is one of our early careers in Africa is using that. She's a pediatric rheumatologist, just like you said, that they're extremely scarce entity. And so in Africa as well. So she's using the ECHO model to connect herself with primary care physicians, and then using them as the first-line care providers. That's how she's changing care in Africa. So you might want to consider that here as well.
Can you just, for the audience, briefly describe the ECHO model?
Yeah, so the ECHO model is not the echo as in the heart echo model. What it is this man called Sanjeev Arora, who Professor Aziz Sheikh introduced to me a while back. He developed this fantastic idea, extremely altruistic idea of the fact that there are outcomes. So he's a gastroenterologist, and he used to treat hepatitis C. But what he realized was that the outcomes of hepatitis were not good, even though effective treatments had come out. But because people were waiting or were not showing up at the tertiary centers, the people are sitting in the community, and the community doctors didn't know how to treat hep C. So what he did was develop this transformative idea that he connected himself to the primary care physicians in the community through Zoom, through the internet. And so every week he would meet with a set of PCPs, and they would it'll be case-based learning once a week. They would tell him about the patients that they'd seen with hep C, and through that, not only they learned, but they were trained on a weekly basis. But also, if the physicians didn't know how to kind of navigate some care issues, they got those questions answered. So the impact of one physician or one specialist became really big through that model. And that model has now gone over multiple countries. Maybe Professor Aziz, you might want to add a few things on that.
First of all, I want to say thank you. Some fantastic presentations here. So it's really good to see the work that's being done. So the original piece of work was done in the hepatitis context. The paper's published in the New England Journal. But it's, in effect, trying to multiply the effect of a specialist by allowing primary care providers to be able to bring their cases and discuss those in detail and then provide care where specialists don't exist. So I think in a Pakistani context, it could be a sort of a potential way forward. The question I had was for Zanab and for Sonia, I think. So given the challenges that you're kind of describing, I wonder whether there may be sort of mileage of doing a deep dive as to where things have actually gone well. So say, for example, if there are women who've received state-of-the-art or optimized care, what is it about those that has allowed that to happen? Or if there are elderly people who are aging healthily without these chronic disorders, for example, or they're not experiencing mental health disorders. These are relatively small populations, I guess, and a deep dive in those might be sort of more interesting than kind of describing the issues that, I think, generally speaking, we know about.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Aziz, and maybe perhaps doing it a mixed method fashion, identifying that population that got care, was sent out alive from the hospital and is doing well.
I actually would agree with Dr. Zainab because, like she mentioned, we're already working with such a limited time frame. There's no way to sort of pan out exactly what sort of interventions or what sort of exposures really led them to, let's say, if we take aging into perspective. So I think definitely for starters, maybe start off with like smaller cohorts that we can maybe, track over the period of certain time durations, and then maybe also get some qualitative data, because I think that would be very, very important in terms of like getting this real sort of like contextual evidence that we need to support our findings.
So could you look at your cohort that is doing well and then survey them against what are considered to be good qualities and like what lifestyle or whatever is better, and that might give you whether that holds, because everything's contextual, like these qualities are from around the world. Do you exercise this? It's unlikely you'll find anyone in Tata who's exercising, but maybe life is making them exercise. So I think it would be interesting to see what, in our context, are markers of health and, not useful life, but good longevity.
It's a great idea, because there are actually we know certain areas in Pakistan where we have super agers, just like, in Japan and other places, we have certain areas we know GB is famous for that. So perhaps actually looking at elderly in those populations and understanding what have they done differently and well.
Because I'm a geneticist, so I see things in the genetics. So for example, we know now the PCSK9 therapy actually came from a female who was like knockout for this gene. And we have a lot of, and especially because of the consanguinity, we have individuals, those can be potential target, or like that can actually, recently there is this paper that came from this PROMISE study where they have identified a gene that can be a therapeutic target for diabetes. And we always look things in the disease, but we really do not look at the healthy individual, and that is definitely a great point to look in not only in, of course, the data, but also in kind of terms of genetics, that why they are doing so well, so that could be a potential target for therapeutics.
So I have a question which is open to, well, anyone in the panel. So when we use these survey data to estimate prevalences, etc., I mean, one risk is this sample selection so biased, and I just wonder, because every country has a unique context, so I wonder, from your experience when you're collecting this data, is there any like a subpopulation or segment of society, either in rural settings or even in urban settings, that you think there's a risk of excluding them? And if there is, what kind, and are there any specific steps or advice that you follow to make sure that you can minimize the risk of excluding those?
Sure. Okay, take a stab at that. So generally with the surveys, Ahmed, generally what they're doing is they are actually getting their sample frames from the Pakistan Bureau of Statistics. And PBS knows to keep in mind that they're covering appropriately rural, urban, as well as areas that they know have significant socioeconomic inequalities. The problem now is going to be, as we move forward, the surveys, as you well know, are extremely expensive to conduct. The household surveys, extremely laborious and expensive. And then half the time people run out of the money after they've done one province. So if we're going to go to newer techniques like the mobile phone that I was talking about, there we're going to run into issues where I just talked about the fact that women were underrepresented, even though there was specific effort made to actually call numbers that were against female names, they just would not pick up the phone. And then even so then you'd say, okay, fine, maybe they're undersampled, you should go get households done. Specifically for female, when you connect through them on the phone, they're unlikely to invite you to the house to get any sampling, anthrometrics, anything like that done. So then we had to pivot and say, why can you come to an AKU lab near you to get this? Because there's scammers out there all the time. So those are some pieces of technology-based detours that we can take for surveys, but we'll still need to kind of take into account and come up with ways to how to handle some of these situations, especially related to gender.
Thank you very much. Over to you.
Now I would like to invite both the chairs and Dr. Zainab to present mementos to our dear fellows. Dr. Myra Riaz. Dr. Nausheen Fatma. Dr. Sabah Sami. Dr. Sabah. Dr. Sonia Samin. Now I would like Dr. Zainab to present mementos to our chair, Dr. Sadaf and Dr. Amreen. And now I would request our chairs to present the memento to Dr. Zainab. Thank you so much. And now we will have a short, very quick 15 minutes break for the tea and coffee, and tea is served outside. So please enjoy the tea, but do come back after 15 minutes. So we will start sharp at 11:45. Thank you. And please take your belongings with you, your bags, anything with you. Thank you.